Hey guys, it's Radhika here again. So today we're going to continue a discussion of what the MCAT is really. And specifically, we're going to talk about CARS, C-A-R-S. CARS is the second section that you'll see in the MCAT. So in this video, what I really want to do is talk to you about two things. The first is to give you an overview of this section. The second would be to leave you with insights. And as a test prep company, Prep 101, and as through myself, an instructor who's been teaching for a while, we found that a lot of people don't know or can't fully fathom what this section is really like. So before we move any further, we want to make sure that we give you a very, very clear idea of what CARS is going to test you on. Let's get started. All right, so CARS is actually abbreviated for Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills. Everyone in MCAT world, however, just calls it CARS. It's comprised of 53 questions, which you'll be tested over in a duration of 90 minutes. And the best thing about CARS is that you don't need any prior knowledge in order to do well on these questions. That means all that memorizing, all the mnemonics that you created for the previous science sections, you won't need to do in order to do well on this section, which is great. But it's not so easy. So CARS is a series of passages that you'll be presented, 9 to be specific, that are coming from either the humanities or social sciences. So 50% will be humanities passages, and the other 50% will be social sciences passages. Let's give you an overview of the section a little more. All right, so this is kind of the format. You're going to have 9 passages that are approximately 600 words long, that are going to be followed by 4 to 6 questions each. Now, what we found lately more so is that instead of 4 to 6 questions, most passages are followed by 5 to 7 questions. So just be aware of that, especially when you're doing practice tests. You want to see how many questions it is that are typically followed by a passage. I've rarely seen passages followed by 4 questions anymore. 53 passage-based questions, no independent questions. So here's where this section really differs from the science sections that we talked about previously. No independent questions means that in order, all of those questions, all 53 that you get, will be derived from the passage itself. And the reason for this is because they've asked you, or they've told you, that there's no knowledge required in order to do well on this section. So they can't ask you independent questions, because in order for independent questions to be possible, you'd have to have previous knowledge. Okay, so this section is basically them throwing tons of information at you from the humanities or the social sciences, followed by a series of questions based on those passages. Now, what it tests are these 3 things: reading comprehension, critical thinking, and time management. And the reading comprehension, not so much. Yes, there are a few questions which will be testing your comprehension. For example, they'll ask you, what did the author mean when they used this word? Or perhaps they'll tell you about, hey, which year did this occurrence happen in? That's reading comprehension. However, the vast majority of this exam is a critical, or this section is a critical thinking skills test or section. And the main thing it will really test you on is time management, because there are severe time constraints. Okay, so I'm starting to delve into talking about some of the insights a little more. So let's get further into it. All right, so here are the CARS insights that we have to offer you as a company who's collected some data. First and foremost, and I've mentioned this already, but I'll say it one more time because it's so important. CARS tests critical thinking. It does not really test your reading comprehension. And the reason for this being is because as a physician, when you're looking at novel information, when you've got new patients, when you've got a new chart, what they really want to see is, can you actually understand this information? Not just comprehend it, but can you apply knowledge to it? Can you make decisions, diagnoses, prognoses, prescribe actions or treatments? And that's why it's a critical thinking test, okay? The reason we call the MCAT a thinking skills test more than a science test is partially because of CARS. Well, mostly because of CARS. It's going to test your ability, this section, to evaluate and apply ideas in prose form while you're maintaining concentration and focus simultaneously to this mounting frustration, okay? So again, it tests critical thinking, not reading comprehension. Secondly, There are fewer questions, or sorry, it's the most difficult section for science students. And this cannot be said enough. So study after study has said that science students find this section the most difficult. And you want to know why? It's because as science students, you're trained to think in a detail-oriented manner. When you read those journal articles, which are very technical pieces of writing, you're absorbing every single bit of information such that you can almost recreate a study. Now, if you're reading in that same manner for cars, you won't do well on this section. And the reason being is because in order to do well, mastering this section is more of an art form. Everything is strange, it's unfamiliar. There's going to be topics that you haven't even thought about, or topics that you didn't even know were topics. And they're going to be presented to you in this wonderful prose form. And then they're going to say, hey, you have 90 minutes to read 9 passages and answer these 53 questions. And if you're reading for detail, you're going to get bogged down, and it's not the focus. It's not the right way to approach this section. Okay. Furthermore, there are fewer questions. And because there are fewer questions, there's a greater pressure to avoid mistakes. So CARS already has a very, very steep, or a relatively steep scoring scale compared to the other science sections. Okay. Now, it has less questions, 53 compared to 59 on the other 3 sections. So each question is valid, is worth more. And so you're already inclined to not get a question wrong. So the pressure is mounting on you. On top of that, you factor in the unfamiliarity, the time constraints, the fact that there's all this technical jargon, and the pressure really increases. And that really doesn't help most students do well on this section. So what you really want to do on this, on CARS, is be able to narrow down to 50% of the answer options. So essentially you want 2. And when you boil it down to 2, you're usually guessing which one out of the 2 is correct. Because you have to make an educated guess and move on. Otherwise, you can spend minutes on a single question. They're all worth the same. And what you find is that you don't finish the section. Or what you find is that there were easier questions later on that you would have gotten, but now you simply don't have the time to do it. So don't fret over one question. Don't fret over a few. You got to keep moving on, okay? Add this on top of the fact that these passages are longer. So on average, in terms of the text, these are 500 to 600 words long, and we say that they're pretty much double in length of the science passages. So that means you're doing a ton more reading. There aren't graphs or figures or tables to kind of break up the text that you see here. Everything is in prose, and to read that many words, register them, and be able to answer questions takes quite a toll on you, and it's a skill that you can actually practice. Okay, also, most people say that it is the most dissatisfying section on their exam. It's a section that most people are uncomfortable with. They're not familiar with the kind of skills. They've never had to practice these kinds of skills for a university level exam or midterm. And on top of that, one of the best strategies to use is to narrow down to 50% and then make an educated guess. And guessing doesn't sit right with most people who are writing this exam. They want to know. So in physics, you never want to guess. In biology, you never want to guess. And should you probably won't be getting a very high score. However, in CARS, if you can narrow down to 2 answer options and make an educated guess between the 2 of them as to which one's correct, you've got a really good chance of performing quite stellar, okay? Everyone that I've come across has admitted that, hey, Radhika, yeah, on some of those questions, I had to guess. And you know what? They still walked away with 95th percentile or 97th percentile. The key, though, is to make sure that you're practicing a lot and to be aware of the fact that you will not be certain of your performance on this section as you will be on the other sections. So because it is the second section that you see out of the 4, your uncertainty, your frustration cannot play into the other sections. Remember, right after this, you still have to do the biological sciences, and after that, the behavioral sciences section. So you have to be able to pull it together no matter how well or how poorly you think you performed on cars, and know that you still have half of this exam to go. Okay, so know that people think it is the most dissatisfying section of their whole exam. However, that's a feeling everyone practically has unanimously, and you will not be sure, and you cannot let those feelings bother you in terms of how well you perform on the rest of this section or on the next sections. Now, the last piece of information that I want to leave you with is that CARS is also the best predictor of performance on board exams. So there have been a few studies, some recent publications have linked a very high correlation of scoring well on CARS to passing the Canadian Medical Board exams. So it is quite a good predictor of your success as a future physician. As much as you don't like it, as much as it makes you angry, as much as it introduces you to skills that you've never had to learn thus far, you have to know that it is an important section for you on this exam and that you have to do really well on it. There are some Canadian medical schools who will look just at this section. For example, McMaster will only take your CARS score. Western University says that you must have met a cutoff of 129 in order for your application to even be considered. So note that despite your dislike for it, or you may love it, it's a very important section and you need to do well on it. All right, so that is my conclusion for today. I hope you were able to learn a little bit more about the CARS section, and I hope you found the insights insightful. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye for now.